House Chief of Staff John Kelly starting his first full day on the job, and he's wasting no time running the West Wing. Incoming White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci out after 10 days, even before officially starting that job. So that's the first big move as we say good morning on a Tuesday. It is August. I'm Bill Hemmer. Welcome to America's Newsroom.
Yeah, and traditionally, Bill, you know August is quiet.
Well, we'll see about that.
There are tumbleweeds. I don't think this August is going to be like that. All right, well, I'm Shannon Bream. Scaramucci's resignation brings the number of White House staffers to leave the Trump administration to 8 in roughly 7 months. The move part of a broader change by Kelly to bring more discipline to the Trump administration.
General Kelly, I think, will bring a new structure to the White House and discipline and strength, and we're all really excited to work with him. General Kelly has the full authority to carry out business as he sees fit.
Meanwhile, you've got this new report that broke last evening from the Washington Post, making some new claims about Donald Trump Jr. in that meeting with a Russian lawyer, and it entails a flight on Air Force One and a letter and a statement that was put out.
Yeah, and Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live from North Carolina. He's literally just hung up the phone getting some new news on this. Good morning, John.
What are you, spying on me, Shannon?
I am always.
Yeah, it's the off-camera stuff that's always the most intriguing. It's kind of like the back-channel conversations here at the White House are always the most intriguing. Let's start with Scaramucci's departure from the White House. This really is an indication of just how much power the new White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, is going to have, because Scaramucci was hired directly by the president a week ago last Friday, and he was hired over the protestations of Steve Bannon, his chief strategist, and Reince Priebus, who is now the dearly departed White House Chief of Staff. It also resulted in Sean Spicer, who was a valued employee, resigning his position. Kelly came in, though, and told the president that he didn't have confidence that Scaramucci was the man for the job, so word went out to Scaramucci that it wasn't going to work and that he was going to have to go. There were really two things at play here. First, one was a chain of command issue, because Scaramucci had taken the job as communications director with the proviso that he would not answer to the chief of staff. He would have a direct line of communication with the president. Kelly came in and said, that's not going to work. Everybody's got to report to me. The other problem for Scaramucci was that profanity-laced interview that he gave to Ryan Lizza of the New Yorker magazine that he thought was off the record, but got published. Here was Sarah Huckabee Sanders' reaction to that yesterday. Listen.
Look, the president certainly felt that Anthony's comments were inappropriate for a person in that position, and he didn't want to burden General Kelly also with that line of succession, as I think we've made clear a few times over the course of the last couple of days to several of you individually. But General Kelly has the full authority to operate within the White House, and all staff will report to him.
In fact, all staff will report to General Kelly, including Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, which really is a change in the chain of command here at the White House, because it used to be that Ivanka and Jared had their direct lines of communication. Scaramucci had a direct line of communication. Bannon likely had one as well, and then the Chief of Staff's office. So that's all going to change. As to what's going to happen with Scaramucci, we understand that he asked to return to the Ex-Im Bank, the Export-Import Bank, to his previous position. No word yet from the White House as to whether or not that will happen, but when asked about it yesterday, Sarah Huckabee Sanders said he currently does not have a job in the administration, but I'm told, Shannon, that he will be going back to Ex-Im.
Okay. So now you've been running down these reports this morning, John, that the president was involved in a statement that Donald Trump Jr. issued after meeting with that Russian lawyer during the campaign, and that meeting came to light.
Yeah, you know, this happened a few weeks ago when the president was on his way back from the G20, when it came out that Donald Trump Jr. on June 9th, 2016 had that meeting with the Russian attorney Natalia Veselnitskaya, as well as a number of colleagues of hers. The Washington Post is reporting last night and again today that the president dictated the initial statement in reaction to that aboard Air Force One on his way back. Let's just review what the initial statement was with you. Quote, it was a short introductory meeting. I asked Jared and Paul to stop by. We primarily discussed a program about the adoption of Russian children that was active and popular with American families years ago and was since ended by the Russian government. But it was not a campaign issue at the time. There was no follow-up. I was asked to attend the meeting by an acquaintance, but was not told the name of the person that I would be meeting beforehand. That's Donald Trump Jr., July 8th of this year. We have since found out that by looking at an email chain, that the initial offer from Veselnitskaya and the people associated with her was that she had some dirt on Hillary Clinton that may or may not have come from the Russian government that she wanted to share. It turned out, though, that information was of no consequence. Getting some degree of pushback here on this idea that the president dictated that particular initial statement. Jay Sekulow, who I just got off the phone with, who's one of the president's chief outside counsels, told me, quote, apart from being of no consequence, the characterizations are misinformed, inaccurate, and not permanent. But talking with other sources, there does appear to be a bit of a disconnect, Shannon, between that statement that was initially made and what Don Jr. and his associates were initially prepared to do. They wanted full disclosure, including disclosure of the emails. They wanted more transparency rather than that somewhat obfuscatory statement that came out initially. Shannon?
All right, John Roberts live for us at the White House. Thanks, John.
So a ton to analyze right now. Editor, National Review, Fox News contributor Rich Lowry with me in studio. Nice to see you, Rich. Good morning. We'll see whether or not this is a new day, as a lot of people are saying, for the last 24 hours. Politico writes this, the following. Kelly assembled senior aides in his office and laid down his rules of the road. More accountability on how jobs are done, more limitations on access to the Oval Office, more structure, better briefings and information for the president, a White House staff where everyone reports to Kelly. Is that where we're going?
Well, that's exactly the right approach, and if this White House is going to get on the right track, that's what they need. And since they've been getting so many basic things wrong, Bill, righting the ship in some elemental sense should be relatively easy. A more orderly process in the Oval Office, ending kind of the zoo in there where anyone can come in at any time and bend the president's ear on anything, a more orderly policy-making process, and strategic communications plan that they actually follow through on and don't step on every day.
You then might agree with Dr. Charles Krauthammer when he said the following last night with Brett.
The Trump administration hit bottom last week, and it seems to have bounced off the bottom. And if the president will allow Kelly some control over the president's own unrestrained impulses, i.e. tweeting, I think that would be a tremendous advance, and it would give this administration a chance of succeeding.
A lot of people have the issue with the tweeting. His supporters do not. Let's make it clear. I don't think he will stop, and you can make the case he should not. But he did go 23 hours without one.
That's true.
And there was one fired off just about 15 minutes ago.
Yeah, well, for the White House, you have to hope the Scaramucci interview with the New Yorker was rock bottom in terms of the chaos. And the ouster of Scaramucci sent a very clear message that Kelly now is in charge. And people say Trump can never change. That's true in the most fundamental sense. But we saw during the campaign, there was a discernible difference between Lewandowski Trump and Bannon-Conway Trump. He was a little more disciplined, and that difference, that increment, might have been just enough to get him over the top.
That's a great point. Yeah, I wonder what the negotiations were like with Secretary Kelly. What did he say we have to do in order to make it successful? The Washington Post story that John Roberts just mentioned. Whether legal or illegal, whether true or not, we'll see where it goes. The point is, whoever leaked that story was on board Air Force One. And that's a small circle, Rich.
Right, but it goes to the point, Bill, that everyone in that White House has been talking to reporters constantly. So it's not, Scaramucci is out there, we're going to stop the leaks, and I'm going to fire people in my communications shop. Well, it's not these low-level people they have to worry about. It's the very top levels of the White House that felt they had to talk to reporters to protect themselves, to promote their own agendas. And this is another task for Kelly, is can you make the White House staff less factionalized so everyone doesn't feel the need to cover themselves constantly. Now, you can't stop leaking, but you want to manage the leaking. And leaking can be very useful if you're White House, if you're putting out the correct kind of leak to help push your agenda rather than this sort of backbiting.
It's a twisted loop. Thank you, Rich. Good to see you. Rich Lowry, National Review. You bet.
Good seeing you.
Shannon, what's next?
Well, breaking news overnight in Venezuela as chaos in that socialist regime continues to ensue. Opposition leaders being dragged from their homes, we're told, and placed in custody. Their whereabouts are currently unknown, and many suspect President Maduro is responsible. Comes after the White House slapped new sanctions on Maduro. Steve Harrigan is tracking it all live in Miami. Okay, Steve, why is this happening now?
Shannon, it's clear by the nature of these raids that Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro is trying to intimidate the opposition. The raids took place after midnight in the homes of two prominent opposition leaders, Leopoldo Lopez and Antonio Ledesma. In each of the cases, because of security video or family members filming, you can actually hear family members scream. They're taking my father away, they're taking my husband away. Ledesma was in his pajamas when he was dragged away, and his daughter is screaming, it's a dictatorship. So clearly an attempt to put fear into the heart of the opposition. Both of these leaders are former mayors of Caracas. Both were under house arrest, and both have called for public opposition to what Maduro is trying to do right now, rewrite Venezuela's constitution, Shannon.
That is some terrifying video, especially in a country where we have a lot of freedom, even if we are part of any kind of opposition as the government may consider it. Okay, so what can the U.S. do about, though, this in a foreign nation?
The U.S. has already taken more steps. Yesterday, they put Maduro himself under sanctions, barring him from any economic activity with the U.S. Maduro's reaction to that was really just snide. He said, bring on more sanctions, Donald Trump. The real question is, will the U.S. go further for oil sanctions? Any sanctions against Venezuela's oil industry could devastate that country's economy. The risk, though, is that it could really increase the suffering of Venezuela's people. So the U.S. has taken steps. They've called Maduro a dictator openly, publicly, linking him with people like Robert Mugabe. But so far, no hits against the oil industry, and that's going to be the big test if the U.S. is willing to go that far to push things. Shannon.
Yeah, that takes it to another level. All right, Steve Harrigan. Thank you.
One thing
very
that
much.
really drives this story home for folks in this country is to see people on black and white surveillance video in the dead of night being taken from their homes.
Well, family members are screaming. I mean,
Takes the story to a new level. We're watching it for you. In the meantime, two of the big stories today, President Trump pushing Republicans try again on health care, but Republican Senator Jeff Flake says it's time for a new way.
I think we've about reached the limits of what we can do with one party. I think we're going to have to involve the other party. We tried. I voted for it. I would have liked to have kept health care alive that way.
So what then is next? Jeff Flake, the senator from Arizona, is our guest next, live.
And the horrific scars of war still clearly visible on the faces of those left behind as ISIS retreats in Iraq. Now the urgent call for aid as doctors in that demolished city warn of a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions.
We are helpless from our government, from our politicians.
Are you getting the help from the government that you need?
We get talk.
Like 1,000% with Donald Trump on this. We should be politically horsewhipped if we don't try again. The best idea we haven't even brought up, take all the money under Obamacare and block grant it back to the states. That ends single payer health care. The government closest to the people is the best government. The health care closest to the people is the best health care.
Well, that's Senator Lindsey Graham urging Senate colleagues to continue working on that plan to repeal and replace. My next guest says it's time for Republicans to go in a different direction. Laying out his case in a new book called Conscience of a Conservative, a rejection of destructive policies, or rather politics, and a return to principle. That senator is Jeff Flake from Arizona. Nice to see you.
Hey,
and good morning to you. Talk about the book in a moment. First of all, the White House is saying do not move on from health care. Get it done. To that you say what, sir?
I do think we need to get it done. More than 200,000 Arizonans will wake up this morning without health care. They will have paid the fine and still can't afford to have a policy. An equal or larger number will have a policy, but they can't afford to use it because the deductibles are too high. So we desperately need reform. I think we're at the end of the rope in terms of trying to do it alone, though. I just can't see how we're going to get any votes just as Republicans.
About the people in your home state, you wonder how could John McCain cast the vote that he did, knowing the facts that you're just laying out?
Well, John McCain has preached from day one that we ought to have regular order and do it in the right way through the committee. So his vote was consistent with his approach, and I respect that.
Well, Ted Cruz says Republicans are going to get an earful.
Well, I think
and he would argue deservedly so.
Yeah, I mean, health. We've been saying forever we need to fix this, and we weren't able to do so. So I think we ought to stick with it, certainly, but I think we ought to do it in a way that we can actually see the end. And the end is going to be sitting down with our colleagues from the other side of the aisle and getting something passed.
We're going to figure out next hour what Democrats are willing to give on that, so we'll discuss that then. Got a great debate coming up for our viewers today. Does an effective tax strategy help make that transition better or easier for Republicans next phase?
No, easier. And I do think, I mean, when you look at what the president put out in terms of the policy particulars that he wants to see, it was a short document, but frankly, it's Republican orthodoxy. You lower the rates, broaden the base. And so I hope that we can move forward. It's even more vital now for Republicans to move forward on tax reform.
Two big issues out there, and they will continue.
Right.
The book you've written is getting a lot of attention because many have seen it as your dislike of the president. I see it differently, but this is one of the quotes you give on screen. If this was our Faustian bargain, then it was not worth it. If ultimately our principles were so malleable as to no longer be principles, then what was the point of political victories in the first place? Your criticism doesn't start now. It starts with President Bush 43. No child left behind, prescription drug medication that wasn't paid for. You're an anti-big government senator. So how then does Donald Trump fit into those principles now?
Right. I do mention in the book, I got to Congress in 2001, myself and Mike Pence. We ran conservative think tanks in the 90s. Me at the Goldwater Institute, he was at the Indiana Policy Review. We got to Congress full of vim and vigor, ready to go. And Mike joked one time, he said, I feel like that we're Minutemen arriving at the battlefront and told the revolution is over. And that's kind of how we felt. We got No Child Left Behind, prescription drug benefit. We had earmark spending that was just egregious. And in 2006, we were turned out of the majority and then lost the White House in 2008. So this problem of this crisis of principle that we're having now didn't start with President Trump. It started long before. But I think some of the policies that the president has put forward, policies of protectionism and isolationism, those are foreign to conservatives. We've always believed in free trade, and conservatives have always been more, more steady in demeanor and in comportment, and that means something. It's not just conservative policy. We can't. Chaos is not a good principle.
You're making the case for the party to get back on its principles. It needs to return to that. And you said you'll oppose the president when you think he's wrong, and you'll support him when you think he's right. You just said why you think he is wrong. Tell us when you believe he has been right.
Oh, he appointed a great Supreme Court Justice, Neil Gorsuch. I was happy to help shepherd that through the Senate. On regulatory policy, I think he's been right. Our economy has been overregulated badly. On tax policy, I think his instincts are right. But then the flip side, I think he's profoundly wrong on free trade. To turn down the TPP or Trans-Pacific Partnership will haunt us for years. And not just in terms of the economy, but in geopolitical areas as well. These countries, particularly in Southeast Asia, need to be in our trade orbit, not just China's. And we will be left behind the world that is already globalized if we don't enter into free trade agreements.
We're going to see how that goes. But thank you for sharing your opinions with us today. The title of the book comes from a statement from Barry Goldwater in 1960.
That's right.
Thank you, Jeff Flake.
Thank you.
All right, 21 past. Shannon.
Well, early in his presidency, President Reagan used addresses from the Oval Office to help him connect with voters.
This is not the time for political fun and games. This is the time for a new beginning.
How one of our guests thinks President Trump can do the same thing to help drive his message home, plus much more. Coming up after this break.
President Trump awarding the nation's highest military honor, 71-year-old Army medic, Specialist James McCloughan, receiving the Medal of Honor for his actions in combat during the Vietnam War. He was honored for risking his life to rescue 10 wounded soldiers despite suffering serious injuries of his own.
The strength and pride of our whole nation was beating inside of Jim's heart. Jim did what his father had taught him. He gave it his all. He was prepared to lay down his life so his brothers in arms could live theirs.
5 men whose lives McCloughan helped save were there to watch him receive that medal at the White House. Well done.
We have the highest stock market in history. We have GDP on Friday, got very little mention. 2.6 is a number that nobody thought they'd see for a long period of time. The enthusiasm level is incredible. We have a lot of tremendous things going.
President Trump praising the performance of the markets and his economic plan. As markets close with record highs, the Dow yesterday rising just over 60 points to finish out the day at 21,891. The president continued to tout the economy this morning, tweeting this out. Stock market could hit all-time high again. 22,000 today. We are watching closely. It was 18,000 only 6 months ago on Election Day. Mainstream media seldom mentions. Joining me now from the Fox Business Network, Maria Bartiromo, host of Mornings with Maria and Sunday Morning Futures. Good to see you today.
Great to see you, Shannon.
Okay, so he's talking about unemployment ticking down, wages up, the market's up. Depends on who you ask about whether he should get credit for that, in part, in full, or not at all.
Well, look, the truth is things are definitely getting better. We are near full employment when you look at where we are in terms of jobs. We are seeing a much better confidence in terms of individuals as well as executives. And as a result, there's a little more spending on the part of businesses. And that's really been where the recession has been. Businesses have been sitting on cash for a decade because they were strangled by regulation. They didn't know what was around the corner in terms of end market demand. I think there's no question that this stock market rally initially was totally because of the anticipation of President Trump. There is no doubt in my mind that people saw his policies as a massive tax cut, going to have an impact on the economy. Earlier in the year, when the president first took office, there was a lot of anticipation that he would get tax reform and health care done. A couple of months into it, obviously, the expectations plummeted. And that's when the markets stopped rallying. And actually, what happened was profits started coming in better than expected. So now you have a very strong backdrop because corporations are making strong profit reports. And you are talking about profits up 6% in the second quarter on top of a 15% gain in profits in the first quarter. Even revenue. You know, Shannon, sometimes earnings you can manipulate because you could cut costs and you keep cutting things until earnings get better and better. But you can't manipulate revenue. Revenue is just what the company is generating. And revenue is expected to be up 6% in the second quarter. So even there, you're seeing much better than expected numbers. So I think initially, yes, this was all about the Trump rally. Today, it's anticipation that the president will get his policies through, like tax reform, but it's also partly due to a backdrop that has simply gotten better. Businesses are doing much better.
So let's talk about this worry that a lot of folks have. Traditionally, August to October, the markets aren't usually on fire. If there are going to be corrections, that would be the time period. It's a little bit slower. What should we look for now moving forward, knowing that they're going to be trying to hammer out tax reform and the White House saying we're not done with health care, but those on the Hill saying we're moving on to taxes?
Well, look, I think at this point we do need to see some evidence that tax reform will take hold. There's no doubt that when you lower taxes and when you actually see a tax reform package, that will have an impact on the economy. You know, I spoke with Kevin Brady as well as Paul Ryan last week, and the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, said to me, there is no way we will get to 3% economic growth without tax reform. So even though profits are really driving this market now, it started with the anticipation of what President Trump can bring to the table, then profits took over. If we don't see tax reform, I think we'll see a massive sell-off in this market because there is some expectations priced in that we're going to get tax reform. So if we don't see tax reform this year, that could be a real problem for this market, no doubt about it.
All right, we're less than 10 seconds away from the open as we watch closely. Do you think this administration, the president's trying to do it, do you think they could do more to message on the economy because it has been such a bright spot for them? He says, listen, mainstream media is not helping us out here. They're not recognizing the things we've gotten done. And we're starting up already around 80 points up for the open.
Yeah, we're waiting on Dow 22,000 right now. It's only a couple points away, and that's what people are going to be really excited about once this market hits 22,000, which looks like it's going to be imminently here. Look, I think the truth is the president does get in his own way. You know, oftentimes he has a very successful day in terms of what they're doing at the White House. He had all the governors and senators in a couple of weeks ago to talk about health care. He could have really, built that up and talked about that a lot. Instead, he came out and he went on social media and he started trashing trashing Jeff Sessions. So there are areas where the president gets in his own way. He could be talking about this a lot more. I mean, look, we're talking about it on the Fox Business Network every day. And I do believe this rally partly is attributable to President Trump, no doubt about it. But the president, instead of just constantly, backing that up and talking about what he's done and how he expects things to continue to get better, sometimes he gets in his own way by talking about things that really are not a positive story for him, like trashing Jeff Sessions.
All right, we still remain about 14 points off that new 22,000 record everybody wants to see. In the meantime, Maria, thank you for lending us your expertise.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
It's an amazing thing to watch.
Bill, you're excited. I see you over there chomping at the bit.
4,000 points in 6 or 7 months. You just never see that.
Well, don't forget, Bill, we took a long time to get to 21,000. I mean, this market could back and fill for a little, even though we're that close to 22,000, but it looks like it'll happen.
Let's enjoy the day.
Taking up.
In a moment, a conservative watchdog group calling for an investigation into former DNC chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz and her connection to a computer staffer arrested for bank fraud. The latest details on this developing story moments away, right here.
President Trump's new chief of staff, retired General John Kelly, taking charge inside the West Wing. Anthony Scaramucci out as White House communications director, while the White House says Kelly will have greater control over which staffers will have access directly to the president. President Trump downplaying claims of an administration in turmoil, tweeting, "A great day at the White House." Joining me now, former Arkansas governor and Fox News contributor Mike Huckabee. Good to see you this morning, Governor.
Well, thanks, Shannon. Great to be with you.
Okay, so we know that the general is now in charge. Your daughter has told us from the White House that he's got the power to round things up. People will report to him. But here is what the Washington Post has to say. Left unclear is whether Kelly will be able to curb the president's inclination to subvert pecking orders, his tendency to encourage rivalries among his staff, and his insistence on managing his own message through social media in ways that have often undermined his aide's strategic planning. Do you see all those things changing?
Well, let's put it this way. If a 4-star Marine general can't get it done, then it can't happen. So I think it's a smart move to put General Kelly in place. He is a good person, a strong person. And I really believe that the president recognizes that he needs to bring some order and discipline to the White House. And John Kelly is just the guy to make that happen.
How about the president's legislative agenda now? Because that is a heavy lift with the failure thus far of health care, tax reform, infrastructure, debt ceiling, budgets, all those things coming. And a lot of folks think there's been, not the biggest stability in organization on that front, on the legislative front. Do you anticipate General Kelly's arrival will change that?
I think the biggest need for change there is that Republicans in Congress need to start acting like Republicans. They need to work with this president. You've got a bunch of people in Congress, Shannon, who are Republican, but they were never Trumpers. They don't want this president to succeed because if they drain the swamp, some of them are going to be drained with it. And their own little fiefdoms will be upended. So I don't see this as much a White House issue as it is a leadership issue in the House and in the Senate. And getting these guys to recognize that the American people voted for Donald Trump to be president, and in the Republican Party, they overwhelmingly nominated him. They need to get in step with their own party more than they need to just get in step with Donald Trump. And when I say that, get in step with the American people who are sick and tired of Washington as usual and want there to be some change, or I think some of them are going to be changed out in the next election.
Okay, so to that point, just moments ago, Bill spoke with Senator Flake out of Arizona, a Republican. He talked about this idea of republicanism, conservatism, Trump principles. Here's what he says about that, Stu.
This crisis of principle that we're having now didn't start with President Trump. That started long before. But I think some of the policies that the president has put forward, policies of protectionism and isolationism, those are foreign to conservatives. We've always believed in free trade, and conservatives have always been more, more steady in demeanor.
So is the White House, the president, at loggerheads with conservatives?
No. I think the problem is you've got globalists like Jeff Flake who are in total disarray with real conservatives. Look, conservatives want America to be strong. They're not interested in being globalist and just melting into this great big international economy. They want Americans to have good paychecks. They want to make sure that if there is free trade, which we do believe in, that it is fair trade and we're not getting sucker punched by China and by people